Have you ever felt like your entire reality was gently pulled out from under your feet, not in a frightening way, but as if the universe had quietly nudged you towards something far greater than you imagined? 6 years ago, I took a job that without warning launched me into a deep and rapid spiritual awakening. I didn't know it at the time, but that decision would shift everything: my thoughts, my energy, my body, and even my sense of time. What started as a simple career move quickly unraveled into something far more profound. And while I didn't fully understand it back then, looking back now, I see how the universe was preparing me for something much deeper than just a new position. In the beginning, I felt incredible, like I was floating through life. There was a softness to everything. I felt joyful light and utterly at peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't overthinking or chasing anything. I was just being. But to be completely honest, there was something strange about it too. It was as if I no longer belonged to the normal world. I felt slightly detached from reality, as if I were looking at life from a distance through a soft, dreamlike veil. The experience was blissful, yes, but also mysterious. And then the physical symptoms began. At first, I brushed them off. I didn't give them much weight. They weren't painful or debilitating, just odd, but they were persistent, and I didn't know what to make of them. I chalked it up to stress, or perhaps a change in routine. That is until recently, when someone in the comments section of one of my videos asked me directly about it. That question sparked something in me. I realized I had never really talked about the physical side of awakening, even though it's a common part of the journey. So today I want to open up and share my experience with you. You see, physical symptoms during a spiritual awakening aren't just in your head. They're real. They've been documented in spiritual traditions for centuries. A quick dive into mysticism, spiritual teachings, or even ancient religious texts will show you countless references to unexplained physical and mental changes that people go through during periods of transformation or deep energetic shifts. Take Korean shamanism, for example. There's a traditional process that spiritual workers such as shamans or mediums go through before they begin their practice. It's called receiving spirit. During this period, they often experience physical illnesses, emotional turbulence, or mysterious symptoms that have no medical explanation. It's believed to be a necessary initiation, one that purifies and prepares the body to become a vessel for spirit. And while I'm not a shaman during the height of my awakening, I too began experiencing a series of unexplainable physical sensations. For me, they weren't extreme and thankfully not painful. But they were certainly confusing and at times inconvenient. And I've come to understand that these symptoms vary from person to person. Some people experience them more intensely, especially if they're resisting the process or holding on to emotional wounds from the past. So if you've gone through or are currently going through a spiritual awakening and your body seems to be reacting in strange ways, I want you to know you're not alone. What you're feeling may be a natural part of the journey. Let me share with you 10 of the most memorable physical symptoms I experienced during my spiritual transformation. Number one, headaches. I used to get headaches often. Sometimes they'd morph into migraines with tight pressure around my forehead and behind my eyes. It felt like something was expanding inside my skull, as if a door was trying to open from the inside out. What's interesting is that during this same period, my intuitive senses were sharpening dramatically. I started having dreams that felt more like visions, and my sensitivity to people's energy became almost overwhelming. Looking back, it makes sense this discomfort centered around the area often referred to as the third eye. My awareness of subtle energies was awakening rapidly, and it was as if my body was adjusting to a new frequency, one that my mind had never operated on before. Number two, feeling sick without any obvious reason. There were days, random, unplanned days, when I just felt off. Not quite ill, but not well either. I'd wake up feeling like I had a cold or flu, but there were no clear symptoms. Just a deep fatigue, brain fog, and a general sense of discomfort. Nothing specific hurt, but everything felt heavy, like my body was wrapped in wet fabric. Even simple tasks like making breakfast or checking my email felt overwhelming. On those days, I usually surrendered to rest. I'd sleep a lot, sometimes the entire day. These episodes never lasted long, maybe 1 or 2 days, at most occasionally stretching to 3. And just as quickly as they came, they vanished. Nowadays, they rarely ever happen, but at the time they felt like a strange kind of internal recalibration. Number 3, brain fog and forgetfulness. Remember how I mentioned that I felt like I wasn't quite part of this world anymore? Well, that disconnect came with a kind. I became forgetful, sometimes alarmingly so. I'd lose track of conversations I'd had just hours earlier. I'd forget what I was doing mid-task. Once I even forgot my own phone number. And another time my address. It was as if my short-term memory had been swept clean. But oddly, I didn't panic. Why? Because I was in such a deep state of contentment and trust. The world around me felt like it had slowed down. Everything was more vivid, but at the same time, my mind felt spacious, like there was less clutter. Still, I realized at some point that I couldn't live like that forever. I needed to re-anchor myself in the physical world. I needed grounding. Number 4, heart palpitations and shortness of breath. This one really caught me off guard. I've always enjoyed physical activity, especially hiking and long walks in nature. But during certain phases of my awakening, I began to experience sudden heart palpitations. Climbing a simple flight of stairs would leave me winded. My chest would flutter, my breath would shorten, and it felt like I had just sprinted uphill even when I hadn't. Naturally, I worried at first. But then just as suddenly as these symptoms appeared, they faded. They didn't stick around long enough to be medically concerning, and they never escalated. It felt more like an energetic surge than a physical problem. Almost like my heart was catching up to a new rhythm, trying to adjust to a different frequency of being. Number 5, changes in sleep patterns. Sleep was another area where I saw huge shifts. Some nights, I'd sleep deeply and wake up feeling completely recharged. But on other days, I couldn't get enough rest no matter how much I slept. I would nap during the day, sometimes multiple times, and still feel exhausted. My dreams became more vivid too. Sometimes symbolic, other times nonsensical, but always emotionally charged. It felt as if my subconscious was working overtime. My body needed more rest because my spirit was doing heavy lifting behind the scenes, processing, integrating, shedding. It wasn't laziness or fatigue. It was spiritual work being done while I slept. As I mentioned before, my sleep patterns were all over the place, and not because of any clear reason. There wasn't a medical diagnosis or a specific event that triggered it. My body simply craved rest. Deep, unexplainable rest. It was as if every cell in me was asking for stillness, for quiet, and so I listened. I slept sometimes for hours longer than usual, and I let my body do what it needed to do. Number 6, muscle tenderness and inflammation. One of the stranger things I experienced was random, unpredictable discomfort in my muscles and joints. For example, I'd feel sudden tension in my back, sharp one moment, dull the next, then it would vanish, almost like it had never been there. There were days when cramps would come and go without reason, like passing waves. It was never anything too serious, but it was persistent enough to notice. I didn't overreact. I didn't panic. I simply observed it, like watching my body speak in a new language I hadn't yet learned. Now let's move on to the next group of symptoms, those that came from my increased sensitivity. Number 7, heightened sensitivity to stimulation. And as my awareness expanded, so did my sensitivity, not just emotionally, but energetically. Suddenly, I could no longer be around certain people. It wasn't about disliking them. It was the chaos, the emotional clutter, the unresolved energy they carried. Their presence felt overwhelming, almost suffocating. Even simple conversations would drain me if the person came with heavy, turbulent energy. So I found myself pulling away. Not out of rejection, but self-preservation. I began craving solitude. I needed silence and space more than ever before. Isolation became a sanctuary, not a punishment. It was the only way I could hear myself think, feel, and simply breathe. Number 8, shifts in food preferences. Another noticeable change was in the way I responded to food. Suddenly, I could feel on a deep level how different foods affected my body. I became highly attuned to what made me feel light and energized versus what left me sluggish and weighed down. Foods like red meat and dairy, they made me feel dense and heavy, like I was carrying something that wasn't mine. My body rejected them, not violently, but persistently. On the other hand, I started craving food that felt alive, like fresh vegetables, fruit, and plant-based meals. These foods felt nourishing in a completely new way. They didn't just feed my body, they uplifted my energy. Interestingly, I also lost my appetite for coffee, sugary snacks, and processed junk food. Sweets especially began to feel too aggressive, like they were attacking my system instead of supporting it. Even the smell of certain artificial treats made me uncomfortable. It was as if my body was shedding not just toxins, but habits that no longer matched my frequency. Number 9, intolerance to restriction. This one surprised me the most. My entire relationship with control and structure began to shift. Any kind of restriction, whether physical, emotional, or even mental, felt intolerable. I couldn't follow diets or rigid routines anymore. I couldn't force myself to work on things just for the sake of money or status. Something in me refused to be boxed in. It was as though my inner being had outgrown the old definitions of success, effort, and obligation. I could no longer pretend to be someone I wasn't. I couldn't make myself do things that went against my inner rhythm. Even when I tried to push through with sheer willpower, my body would push back through exhaustion, restlessness, or emotional dissonance. I realized I could no longer betray my true self. The masks had to come off. Number 10 changes in how I watch TV. I used to love unwinding in front of the television. Like many people, I'd spend hours binge watching shows, getting lost in fictional worlds. But as my awakening deepened, something shifted. Suddenly, I couldn't sit through a show without feeling uncomfortable, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I'd get restless and even agitated. Violent movies in particular became unbearable. Watching pain and cruelty play out even in fiction started to feel like a personal wound. It wasn't just unpleasant, it hurt, deeply. And afterward, I'd carry a strange heaviness that lingered for hours. It was as if my spirit was rejecting anything that wasn't rooted in love, peace, or truth. Now, I want to say this clearly, these symptoms weren't just random quirks, they were signs. Signs that something deep inside me was shifting, that my entire way of being in the world was evolving. Of course, there were other changes too. Some weren't physical at all, but mental and spiritual, like a vast ocean of wisdom slowly revealing itself to me. But that's a story for another video. So how did I cope with these physical symptoms? Well, I didn't fight them. I didn't try to suppress or control them. Instead, I met them with curiosity. I observed. I listened. I allowed. Rather than asking what's wrong with me, I asked, what is my body trying to teach me? That mindset helped me stay calm and connected during even the strangest moments. I respected the process. I trusted that my body knew what it was doing. And you know what? I believe this isn't just happening to me. We're all going through immense changes right now, shifts that are both energetic and literal. Some of us are more aware of them. Others are still waking up to the signs. But if you're feeling strange physical symptoms without a clear cause, maybe your soul is simply evolving and your body is catching up. So what about you? Are you going through anything similar? Have you noticed strange changes in your body or energy lately? Let's open the conversation. Share your experience in the comments. Who knows, maybe by speaking our truth will help others feel a little less alone on this path. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm genuinely grateful for your presence and for choosing to connect. If you found this video valuable, please consider giving it a thumbs up so that it can reach more people who might need to hear this. Until next time, with love. Decode the hidden,